So Assaf, thanks for taking some time out. You're here at New York Future Stack, CTO Riskified, right?
Yeah, I love to be here. New Relic are definitely maybe my favorite vendor.
Yes, it helps. Hopefully partner, right? Because we really try to focus more on a partnership. So I thought before we kind of go into conversation, maybe it'd be great if you could share a little bit, first about kind of your role, because as CTO, kind of the things you're focused on, maybe the big rocks you're trying to accomplish, and then tell everybody, if they're not familiar with Riskified, kind of a little bit about Riskified and what you're focused on as a company.
Well, Riskified is a fraud prevention solution for e-commerce. Basically, fraud is a big problem for e-commerce. When there's a fraudulent order, the merchant knows about it usually an average 60 days after the transaction was made. They already lost the goods. They get fined for the chargeback by the credit card company. It's a huge liability on them, and the whole liability is on them from the credit card company point of view. So it's a huge inefficiency because they're very afraid of it. They end up many times declining good orders and rejecting good customers because they want to avoid it. It's a financial and operational headache for merchants. And much like in Relic, we thought that a company that concentrates in risk management will do a good solution to solve it end to end. So the new thing we brought into fraud prevention was the idea of a binary answer, yes or no. So we are not throwing the problem back at the merchant by giving them a score or a tool to do it internally. We tell them if the order is good or bad. Okay, we look at the order, we enrich it, we do feature extraction on it, we put it through machine learning, and we spit out a yes or no, and basically take the order or don't take the order. And that way they can totally rely on us, and we can optimize the whole thing. And because we were many times telling them to actually accept risky orders that they would previously decline, so this is both our ROI, okay, because when we go with a merchant, we usually increase their approval rates. So we increase their bottom line, and it's a win-win for both sides. And it's the liability on us because we had to build a super accurate system. Because when we're making a mistake, when our models are making a mistake, we pay.
Gotcha. So that opens up, I have a lot of questions. So it's funny, in this series, it's kind of technology leaders talking to technology leaders. I was just recently talking to the former CTO of First Data, and seeing how a lot of times the card manufacturers, many merchants, if they don't have a sophisticated system, the first time they figure out there's fraud is when the credit card merchant has reversed the charges and that money just came out of their bank account. So I could see where a lot of customers are excited to engage. If you could just share, I'm just curious, as so like if I'm a e-commerce merchant and I want to use Riskified, and because I'm tired of getting too many chargebacks, what does that look like? How do you solve their challenge?
So we are cloud-based. We have an API. They send all the information of the order, of the checkout, to us. We then process that data. First of all, we provide a very rich API so they can pass to us as much data as possible. Second, we enrich that data, which is much data as possible from external resources. We do it very fast. Then we have a lot of resources around building machine learning models, doing feature engineering on machine learning model, and these are the things that happen in real time to take all that information, digest it for machine learning, score it with machine learning, and then give back the merchant a simple yes or no answer. And they are integrating that into their order management systems. So we are in the critical path. It's an interesting type of system because we're in the critical path of merchants. We're doing pretty much heavy lifting with heavy analysis that has to happen in real time and spit up super accurate answers in a matter of seconds.
I'm gonna have to fight myself not to get geeky because I think about the heavy machine learning and you're kind of discovering patterns. So just by people creating fraud, your system's detecting.
We have to evolve all the time.
And constantly looking and say, here's this new pattern and doing that. So that intellectually, that sounds like a pretty good challenge and something I'm sure you're doing, delivering a lot of value to customers. Is there any like customer win stories, like when they start using Riskified? It must be a night and day, especially if they're not using anything.
Almost every story is a story like that because they come skeptical, you know. They have their own solution working.
Right.
Some of them are like, okay, they're clueless. They're like, okay, you do it. But many of them come with a solid knowledge of fraud, but they've been using rule-based systems or scoring solutions, and the majority of the times, it's a relationship that become a real partnership. They see how we increase their sales, and they trust us, and we start working together in implementing more products and more touch points. And you know, we had quite a few exits. Some of the startups that joined us while they were growing, you know, ended up actually getting acquired, and you can see how the average growth of merchants generally in our system is higher than the growth in e-commerce in general.
Right.
We're getting adopted by the people that are willing to try new things and that are very focused in growth. So it's a really nice.
That's great. So that's nothing better than helping your customers succeed and get acquired, move forward, and you know that sense of customer partnership. You know, is great, and obviously how New Relic. So let's talk a little bit about your New Relic story. You know, how did you first get introduced to New Relic, and what were kind of the business problems that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, this was exactly the presentation I was giving because New Relic was with us from day one, basically. I knew it from before. And I made a conscious choice to pay the extra money for having a great tool in place. In different stages, it helped us in different ways. I think that the most important thing in the beginning for the initial choice was just focus, you know. The same thing I'm telling to merchants, don't start building your own risk solution in-house. I'm going to do it better than you. And just focus on selling and doing e-commerce and not on this complex problem. I also wanted my team to build my solution and not spend time on boilerplate stuff of building our own monitoring platform when I knew that there's an awesome tool out there. And DevOps culture was another big thing. Having a great tool from day one is something that was really helpful in cultivating the DevOps culture. And you need to cultivate it. It's something that you need to consciously work on all the time in order to make sure that this is the kind of organization that you develop. And you have CI/CD for the testing and for the deploy, but if nobody's monitoring the deploy in the end, they don't really own it. So monitoring is a key, and it's much easier to get people to monitor stuff when they're working with a great tool. And if I would have come to them with this like half-baked monitoring system, nobody would. It would be much harder sell internally.
Sure, that makes sense. So focus on the differentiators, and you know, you'd use New Relic and you knew what a differentiator, how to help the business. Just like you're telling your customers they don't need to be in the risk business. You've got great systems to help them with that. And then, you know, when you talk about CI/CD, I don't know if you've experienced this, but you know, I'll share in a previous role I had software teams, and one of the software teams was a kind of a small business, about $160 million, and before New Relic, you know, and again, I brought it in when I was driving transformation. The team was doing tasks, like they had a task, go do this Jira ticket, build this piece of feature, and they didn't really understand how that impacted the customer experience. And when we put New Relic in, they kind of had that business dashboard where they could start to see, I released the software and it moves business KPIs. I know, I have visualization, I can observe the customer experience. Is that a big mover in your teams, you know, for maybe teams that never used New Relic before?
Yeah, so most of the people in our in the dev team, a lot of them have grew up with New Relic,
Grew up with New Relic already, so they already knew the benefits.
It's hard for me to compare out with New Relic without, but definitely Insight made a big difference like that, because you're talking about combining the business metric with the technical metrics.
Correct.
And Insight, one of the big changes for us in the introduction of Insight is we started building exactly that into our dashboards. So looking at the merchant level, the customer level view of how response time looks like,
how they're experiencing your service.
Yeah, how the SLA.
Yeah.
And even more than that, New Relic helped us see the change and see the improvement. You know, I shared that in the presentation I just did. New Relic became like the receipt for payback of debts. You know, a team used to when a team ends an effort to improve something, usually it ends up with an email with a screenshot from a New Relic graph that shows the improvement. You know,
because you can use the data. The data shows that there's that improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't measure it, right?
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So yeah, it's amazing when teams can see the difference in customer experience and they could see those KPIs moving versus if they have no instrumentation, or, you know, in some companies, you know, very few these days where they used to have another team that just did monitoring. You know, you really want your teams involved in instrumentation, seeing that customer experience everywhere.
Exactly. We took it even further in the last few years. You know, monitoring just not part of the culture. It's also part of the process now. And when we're getting bigger and we have better defined processes, monitoring became something that you are planning. Part of releasing and designing a new component is you design your monitoring.
How do we know what this is doing for our customer?
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
How are we going to monitor this? What do we have to have in the code for instrumentation ahead of time? What parameters are important? You know, what custom parameters I want to put in? What the dashboard is going to look like.
That's awesome. So, you know, you said you used New Relic before, so started with it in that journey. You know, you've probably had tremendous growth. You know, how long is Riskified?
Riskified has been around for 6 years. We've been having annual average growth of 3x.
Wow.
Right?
So tremendous growth. So any last words of wisdom if you're a technology leader, or maybe you're going to start a business that's going to be disruptive and redefine things like you've done? Is there anything you suggest? Obviously we could say the easy thing, which is use New Relic, but is there anything else you could suggest to them when they're starting? They're like, hey, if you do this, your team will go faster and better.
Again, I think the focus is the most important thing. You know, we knew what we were developing, and getting to that point where you can feel, do you have market fit or not, is the most important thing. You know, I've been in startups for the last 20 years, so 15 years before Riskified, and it was always a lot of hype, raised a lot of money, developed great technology, nobody really wanted it, moved to the next one. And it was frustrating, and my biggest, you can't control timing, you can't control luck, you know,
luck, skill, timing, all those have to come together, yeah.
But you can control how you are operating. And the sooner you get out there with whatever you can to have an end-to-end solution. So we started totally manual,
right?
Okay. We didn't have the machine learning in place, but we gave a service, we see that it resonates. And I think it helped us develop the system in a way that resonated and evolved to the right direction. And we didn't lose time, and we could have lost the timing if we didn't move that fast.
I like that. Just to get out there, start trying to solve customer problems, see if it resonates, and of course you need to have the data to see if you're solving those problems.
Yeah, and once you have enough data, you can also move to the machine learning side, you know, like you just have enough now and start going forward.
And we just dated each other because back in the beginning when cloud computing was the same thing, I remember sitting in New York, I was the CEO of a company called Interland, which then became web.com. and sitting with the venture capitalist, and he asked me, he says, all right, so what's your pitch? And I said, the bottom line is every single business is going to run their business on the internet. And 20 years ago, I remember he said to me, he goes, kid, do you believe your BS? And here, not only is everybody running their business on the internet, Riskified is really kind of coming and helping companies move faster and saying, hey, you know what? You need to understand risk. We can do that better for you. So thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation, and
thank you so much.
Have an awesome afternoon.